Mr. Chair, I am concerned by the rate of executions in Iran. Reports indicate that since the beginning of the year, 435 persons have been executed. There are some encouraging signs, though. The law on anti-narcotics may reduce sentencing of death penalty. In the last year, at least 2 executions of juvenile offenders has been postponed due to the timely interventions of the authorities. However, at least 4 juvenile offenders were executed and 86 more are known to be on death row, although the actual figure may be higher. I take the opportunity to reiterate my request for a list of all juvenile offenders on death row and reiterate my appeal to the Iranian authorities to urgently abolish the sentencing of children to death and to engage in a comprehensive process of commutation of all death sentences issued against children in line with juvenile justice standards. Furthermore, I recently received information concerning Muhammad Ali Tahiri, the founder of a spiritual movement, writer and practitioner of alternative medicine, theories used in Iran and abroad, who was sentenced to death on the charge of Fasad al-Arz, corruption on earth. His appeal is pending before the Supreme Court. The trial took place amidst serious due process concerns, and a number of his followers were arrested and reportedly coerced into giving confessions. I call for the immediate withdrawal of the charges against Mr. Tahiri and for his unconditional release, and the withdrawal of charges against all individuals held for peaceful exercise of freedom of expression, religion, or belief. Mr. Chair, there are numerous reports of use of physical and mental torture, including to coerce confessions. I regretfully note that amputation, blinding, flogging, and the continued use of prolonged solitary confinement continue to be regularly practiced. I am also deeply concerned by the consistent reports of the denial of access to proper and necessary medical treatment of detainees, including the deprival of medical care as a form of punishment. Mr. Chair, I would like to pay tribute to those individuals and organizations who submit information to my mandate, many in fear for consequences. More broadly, I have received ongoing and consistent reports of harassment, intimidation, and persecution of human rights defenders. For example, the well-respected human rights defender Nargis Mohammadi continues to be imprisoned simply because of her commitment to human rights. I am also deeply concerned by the reports of attacks on women human rights defenders in the form of judicial harassment, detention, and severe smear campaigns. Interlocutors living outside their country have expressed extreme fear also of reprisals against their family members living in Iran, and I have received reports of action taken mainly by the judiciary against the family and lawyers of activists in order to exert pressure upon them. I will continue to document and report on such intimidation in line with my mandate and while seeking to ensure confidentiality where necessary. In my report, I also highlight the situation of trade unionists held in prison for peaceful activism, as well as the urgent and critical health situation of prisoners of conscience or having undergone life-threatening hunger strikes to contest the legality of their detention. Mr. Chair, equally disturbing and no less chilling are the reports that I receive of violations against the rights of freedom of expression, opinion, information, and the press. As of June 2017, at least 12 journalists as well as 14 bloggers and social media activists were either in detention or had been sentenced for their peaceful activities. Other media workers report being subjected to interrogation, surveillance, and other forms of harassment and intimidation. In the course of this year, I have met numerous journalists, including some working in the Persian service of the British Broadcasting Company, BBC, during a short visit to the United Kingdom. They described how they had been harassed and intimidated by agents of the state. In some cases, I understand that those targeted did not return to work. I have also received reports of family members being called in for questioning and warned of dire consequences if their relatives continue to work for the BBC Persian service, and the imposition of asset freezes preventing the journalists, for example, from being able to sell their property in Iran. I received written submissions from many of the journalists that I interviewed, which detailed the intimidation that they had been subjected to. They all sought private meetings for fear of the consequences of being identified as having provided information to my mandate. Mr. Chair, in my report, I noted that the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention had identified an emerging pattern concerning the arbitrary deprivation of liberty of dual nationals, which has continued this year. To illustrate, I highlight a number of individual cases in my report and most recently called for the release of Nazneen Zaghari Radcliffe in line with the August 2016 opinion of the Working Group. Mrs. Zaghari Radcliffe is a dual national who is serving a sentence of 5 years and is now facing new charges which could lead to an additional 16 years of imprisonment. I also am deeply disturbed by the recent conviction of Dr. Ahmad Raza Jalali to death following a trial marred by violations of due process. He was accused of espionage. However, the vehement reaction to the social media campaigns protesting against mandatory dress code, the arrest of individuals for allegedly reading and spreading feminist literature, and the ongoing ban prohibiting women from watching sports events in stadiums in contravention to the Charter, and exclusion of women from certain occupations and positions suggest much remains to be done to realize these commitments. I call upon the government to address these concerns in practice and legislation through ratifying the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and to repeal all laws and policies that discriminate against women and girls. Mr. Chair, I have also documented the situation of ethnic and religious minorities in the country, including the unabated discrimination against and targeting of Baha'i community, which threatens their right to livelihood. I reiterate my call upon the government to guarantee their equal protection as provided by the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights to which Iran is a party. I have also been disturbed by the reports of arbitrary arrest, detention, torture, and persecution of activists carried out by ethnic minorities to promote social, economic, cultural, and linguistic rights, and call upon the government to ensure that the rights of all communities are protected. I am deeply concerned at the numerous and consistent reports indicating a lack of independence of the judiciary, as well as the restrictions imposed upon the bar associations, which limit their ability to operate independently. There are also a significant number of reports of lawyers being intimidated, harassed, and arrested while performing their professional duties. I further received information related to the repression of human rights defenders and activists, which has led to the curbing of collective organized initiatives to defend human rights within the country amidst surveillance and intimidation. I also heard from the representatives of ethnic minorities on discriminations faced and violations perpetrated against the Baha'i community. I look forward to formally reporting on the findings of this mission in due course. Mr. Chair, I would like to conclude by paying tribute again to those who continue to speak out and provide information to my mandate amidst a blanket of fear and intimidation directed towards them and their families.